Welcome back to lesson 3 out of 4 on Lent 2021. This lesson is going to be focused on the Rosary. The Rosary is something that's very special for Catholics and for all Christians. Today's lesson is going to talk a little bit more in detail about how you say the Rosary and why the Rosary is so important. Now, we know that the Rosary starts with an Our Father, then with 10 Hail Marys and ends with a Glory Be. But Mr. Kearney, I know you know an awful lot about the Rosary. It's very, very important to you. So can you tell me a little bit more about the Rosary itself?
Oh, right, Miss McGinley. I just love the Rosary. I wouldn't let a day go past without saying the Rosary now. When I was younger, I didn't know much about it at all. But the first time the Rosary stood out for me was, I remember my granny dying and then my granda dying down in Dumbarton. They lived. And in those days they had a tradition that the body would be brought back to the house, and a lot of friends, family and neighbours would come round and pray the Rosary. And I remember round my granda's body particularly, and there was maybe 100 people crowded into the house on the stairs, just an ordinary council house, and folk were saying the Rosary, and I was trying to, my head couldn't understand what it meant that someone had died, that I'd never see my granda again. But I remember thinking it was so comforting and so powerful that people were saying the Rosary, and it just somehow carried me through and carried everyone through. And I remember it really stood out for me, and it helped me an awful lot at that time cope with the reality of death, and I could see what faith really meant in your life and how it really counted at these big points of your life. Another thing was, a lot of people there didn't have jobs or didn't have much money and different things, very ordinary people, but they were the salt of the earth, and they were really, really great, kind people. And again, that just stood out for me too, that, you know, how good ordinary people are, that money isn't important. You know, we all die, we don't take anything with us, but how important and what a great gift a faith in God and a faith in Our Lady, how important these things are. So, what about yourself, Miss McGinley? When did you come across the Rosary for the first time?
I think that the first memory I have of the Rosary, Mr. Kearney, is from a very young age, I would say, 8 years old. That momentous occasion when you make your first communion, the sacrament itself being so special, but equally the party as well at that point was very special for me as well. And I remember going home after my communion, so excited to open all these wonderful gifts, to find, I think I had about 8 different sets of rosary beads. And I remember thinking, why do I have all these rosary beads when you only need the one simple one, all these fancy jazzy rosary beads? But the special thing about the rosary beads isn't how they look, really. It's what they facilitate and what they help us to do, and that's the focus on the Rosary itself, the prayer itself, and that communication with God and with Our Lady. So I think from that young age, from then onwards, I started to think about praying the Rosary by myself, and not just as part of that primary 4 class, preparing for the sacrament of communion.
That's great, Miss McGinley, because that reminds me, I've got a memory of way back. You know, I'm 33 now, so this would be going back, things about 25 years or something. And I remember in the month of October and the month of May, my mum would I mean, there were 11 of us in the house. We were crammed in, but somehow with a wee table she had a statue of Our Lady, and we lived beside a railway, and we climbed the fence, and all we weren't really meant to, but we were good. We stayed away from the trains, but we climbed the fence and go over, and there were wild daffodils in April and May, and we would get them and put them in a wee vase at the statue of Our Lady, and I'm sure we probably said a wee decade of the Rosary then. But I remember that was my first encounter really in that sense with Our Lady. It was a few years after that my granda died. So The Rosary is a powerful thing. You end up talking about all sorts of things. So that's good. So Miss McGinley, I think she'd lighten things up a wee bit. A couple of wee jokes to do with not like me to spring in a wee dad joke, but a couple of wee jokes to do with the Rosary. First one, who's the patron saint of slimmers? Do you know that, Miss McGinley?
I don't, Mr. Keeley. You would think I would, but I don't. Who is the patron
This
saint?
isn't the real
Slimmers?
answer, right? There is actually one, but the patron saint of slimmers is St Gabriel.
Oh,
So you know how your wee boy's Gabriel?
of course, yes.
Well,
How could I forget?
why is it Gabriel? Do you
Why
think?
is it Gabriel? Tell me.
Because it tells you in the Rosary, St Gabriel came down to announce. Right? No that we're recommending that anyone slims down to announce because they'd be dead, but angels are all right. So that's the first one. And the other one's a wee bit connected. Who's the patron saint of shopkeepers?
I don't know, Mr. Keeley. Tell me, who's the patron saint of shopkeepers?
Again, this isn't the real one, there is a real one, but the patron saint of shopkeepers is St Francis de Sales.
Of course.
Of the Sales, and that's the first person that we're going to hear about.
It is indeed.
So, what did St
indeed.
Francis de Sales have to say about the Rosary?
So St Francis de Sales says about the Rosary that's the greatest method of praying is to pray the Rosary because of how powerful it is, because how important it is to talk to Our Lady. The second quote we have here from St Therese is that the Rosary is a long chain that links heaven and earth, and what a powerful image that is for all of us, to think that we could be that strongly linked to Our Lady and to God. It's a beautiful image and something that helps me definitely when I'm praying the Rosary.
St Anthony says that when people love and recite the Rosary, they find it makes them better. That's why we're recommending the Rosary to you during Lent. Somehow it makes us a better person. Someone said that if you're living a bad life and you start saying the Rosary, you'll soon give up one or the other. You either give up the Rosary and lead a really bad life, or your bad life will change and you'll start to live a good life. Sister Lucy of Fatima, remember in class we learned about a lady of Fatima appearing to the 3 young shepherd children. She said there's no problem, no matter how difficult it is, that can't be solved through praying the Rosary. And Our Lady at Fatima told the children that praying the Rosary can stop wars. Praying the Rosary can bring people back to God, even the biggest sinner in the world. So sometimes we worry about people and their lifestyle. So praying the Rosary can be so helpful for them. And remember, all you have to do is to say one Our Father, 10 Hail Marys, and a Glory be to the Father. I saw a wee cartoon version of Fatima one time, and it went down to just say Our Father, then Hail Mary, the words Hail Mary 10 times, and Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit. The children had shortened it that much. So whatever you do, we want you to have a wee go at saying it.
The final quote that we have here is from one of my favourite saints, and hopefully one of your favourite saints as well, St John Paul, our patron saint. And he said about the Rosary that the Rosary was his favourite prayer. And we all know that because we've all studied and learnt lots of fantastic facts about St John Paul in our first year learning. So, like our patron saint, we too should have the Rosary as one of our favourite prayers.
Now we ask you simply to watch 2 YouTube video clips, please. The first one is a young woman who gives a fantastic explanation of the Rosary. She didn't have many views the first time I came across her, but it's really a wonderful explanation, and other young people I'm sure will appreciate it. The second video is from a sister, Emmanuel Maillard, who works in Medjugorje now, and she tells a lovely story about the power of the Rosary. And she tells a story about her dad who was in the labour camps during the war, and how the Rosary saved his life. And without the power of the Rosary, he would have been killed, and Sister Emmanuel would never have been born. So they're two very interesting clips. We hope you enjoy them.
Your task after watching the 2 video clips and after listening to the podcast, of course, is to write down either in a mind map or in a list everything that you have learned about the Rosary. Please remember to return your work to your teacher and good luck.
And happening team, all the best.